As the Denver Broncos prepare for the second half of the season, which players on the offensive side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, and the coaching staff have to step up if the Broncos are going to lead a charge in the second half stretch of the schedule? We talk about it, we break it down, and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, or whether you're watching us on YouTube. We're available on your favorite podcasting provider, so make sure when you wake up, you have your morning cup of coffee, you go on a run, you work out, you're driving to work, turn on Locked On Broncos for the latest updates on everything orange and blue from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host and good friend, Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Sayre, the bye week blues continue, but you know what? It's kind of like a good thing that the bye week is here. It allows us to step back and recharge a little bit. It allows Broncos fans to step back and recharge a little bit, and hopefully players on the offense and defensive side of the ball, plus the coaching staff, recharge as well, because they're going to need it if they want to make a run here in the second half.
They are. I mean, there's no question about it. They have to refocus. It's kind of like halftime of a game, right? It's like, I remember against Seattle, everybody's like, well, I guess the Broncos are going to have to go in and make some serious halftime adjustments now. And I mean, that's exactly what it is. And you could really say that, I guess, about most of the games this season. It feels like the Broncos have needed a big halftime adjustment. But here we are. The Broncos have probably the most ideally placed bye week in the NFL regular season these days. When you're playing 17 games over 18 weeks, you get a bye right at week 9. I'd say week 9, week 10, probably the ideal time to have a bye week. But the Broncos get their bye coming off a trip to London. The Jacksonville Jaguars, no such luxury this week. So, Cody, I feel like at halftime of the season, the Broncos have an opportunity here. You just made a big trade. You obviously have had a lot of change over the course of the last 6 or 7 months. Things are really in a state right now where the Broncos are still building culture. And what are they wanting to build? What are they wanting to see going forward? Who needs to step up for this team in order to do what you said, make a charge in the second half? I think we have an idea of the specific players that if these guys step up, we could see the Broncos go on a big run.
Well, let's take a look at the offensive side of the ball. And I think first off, starting off with Russell Wilson, the Broncos' big-time investment. They traded for him. And things, I think, when we look back at the first half, nobody in Broncos country expected things to go the way that things have with Russ. And Russ has had some moments of ups and downs, but we've seen moments from Russell Wilson that tell us he can still be the guy he's always been in his career, which I think is very promising. So it's kind of like, hey, what is the common denominator? It's a new offense. Maybe that's the case there, but there's things that we're seeing that Russ is doing a lot better. Plus, the hamstring didn't seem to bother him in Sunday's game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But if the Broncos are going to turn things around in the second half and go on a little bit of a run there, Russell Wilson has to be a little bit more consistent himself. And I think even he would acknowledge that he's got to play better. It's the ultimate team game. There's certain things that he was able to do, and I'm glad that he was able to shake off that early rusty start against the Jaguars, because first pass, almost intercepted. Second pass, intercepted. Part of me would have felt like if this was any other quarterback that the Broncos have had in the last couple of years, I don't know if they would have been able to recover, but it didn't impact Russ in any way, shape, or form because he got things going. I think it starts with him, more importantly, on the offensive side of the ball, but there's also some other people around Russell Wilson that he needs more from, right? And the offense simply needs more from as well.
Absolutely. Courtland Sutton being one of those main guys, right? We go into this season, you kind of feel like Courtland Sutton is your wide receiver one. He's that guy that you're going to be relying on week in and week out to be the primary target in the offense. That simply hasn't been the case so far in the 2022 season, right? I mean, there's been, again, like with Russell Wilson, there's been glimpses of Courtland Sutton being that wide receiver one type of playmaker for you. But especially in recent weeks, Cody, I feel like we've seen not necessarily a drop off, but, no pun intended, a lot of drops from Courtland Sutton, a lot of missed opportunities, and a lot of things that you just see from him that you're kind of like, man, that doesn't seem like the guy that was mossing Denzel Ward back in 2019, or that doesn't seem like the guy that was out there just dominating against the Los Angeles Chargers, where the Broncos were so confident in him. Remember in that season where Drew Lock came in as the starter and Courtland Sutton, they were just like, let's just heave the ball up to Sutton. He'll draw a pass interference flag at the very least. Where has that guy gone? Even last year, Sutton was drawing a lot of pass interference penalties. We need to see a better second half from him. And I think nobody's going to be more critical of the first half of the season than Courtland Sutton, in terms of what we've seen from him. And Cody, I feel like he's going to be key. If he can get going, if he can establish himself as a true wide receiver one. This has nothing to do with Jerry Jeudy either. I mean, Jerry Jeudy can continue to be a focal point of the offense, but you need somebody like Courtland Sutton that you can go to in any situation and count on him, like with Brett Rippon in his game against the Jets, to throw that deep ball like he did and to hit him in a perfect spot. And Sutton, instead of going up and getting the ball, he waits for the ball to come into him. You cannot have that in the second half. You have to attack the ball. That ball has to be yours. I think if he steps up in the second half, Cody, good things are going to happen for the Denver Broncos.
That's the hope and the expectation, right? Because Courtland's got the talent. And I would tell you this too, as a captain, he always talks with the media after the game, and he's very accountable, and he said, I have to step up. And especially after the Jets game, he's like, I got to do a better job. Brett gave me a great opportunity to go make plays, and I didn't do it. I got to go do that there. So the accountability is there for Courtland, right? You just want to see the on-field stuff be pieced together a little bit more consistently. And you know what? I think that maybe this bye week is coming at the perfect time for the Broncos, the offense, Russell Wilson, Courtland Sutton, but maybe even for the offensive line as well. Just in general, I think the offensive line has to be a lot better going into the second half. And I feel like there's some things that they've built on, right? I think that so far when we've seen Billy Turner at right tackle, it's been good. We haven't seen any big game-breaking plays going against the Broncos off the right edge in terms of sacks. A lot of the pressure and some of the sacks we've seen have come on the interior, inside the B gap, inside the A gap, and that's been the guard and center position. And then it kind of eased up, I'd say, a little bit when Graham Glasgow came in at center. And we'll see if that trend continues, if he can maintain, a consistent level of play there. But Dalton Reiser's got to play better. Quinn Miners had a couple of plays where he got beat inside, especially in pass rush there, and gave up a sack there. So you just have to see a little bit more consistency in general for the offensive line. I do think it is trending in the right direction. The Broncos are able to run the ball a little bit more effectively than they have been at the beginning of the season. So maybe things are now starting to align for this Broncos football team. And coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country, Sayre and I, we're going to take a look at players on the defensive side of the ball. Which players need to step up in the second half if the Broncos are going to make a stretch run against some very, very, very tough opponents coming up here to finish the season. But before we do all that, folks, let me tell you about Prediction Strike, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And this episode is brought to you by Prediction Strike, the world's first sports stock market. And you can now invest in professional athletes just like stocks. It's a lower risk alternative to sports betting, and athlete prices move based on performance and supply and demand. If you invested in Jalen Hurts 1 year ago, you'd be up 48.2%. Rashad Penny is up 154% despite having a significant season-ending injury. And then Kyle Pitts, the promising guy in his second year with the Atlanta Falcons, is down 44.12% after struggling to start the year. And all the athletes, they benefit too and are entitled to a percentage of their market cap, unlike sports betting companies. 2.5% trade fees is the lowest in real money sports, and you can invest in 4 sports, not just the NFL. You can invest in the UFC, NBA, and the MLB. And everyone knows you should be investing, but why not invest in something that you actually know as a football fanatic? Download the Prediction Strike app and use code LOCKED for a free share when you sign up and make a first deposit of $20 or more. That's promo code LOCKED for a special one-time giveaway. Prediction Strike will choose one person who signs up with code LOCKED and make a deposit to win 100 free random shares. That could be worth up to $3,000 if you get lucky and receive Josh Allen shares. Invest in what you know on Prediction Strike, the stock market for sports. And our good friends over there at Built Bar and Sayre, can we pause the pod for a second? Okay, we're paused. Here's the thing. Great, because you got to try this, and this is what I'm talking about. Built Bar's new reimagined flavors. Cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper. They also have white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. And candy cane brownie puff. Built Puffs are still biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. First off, for anyone who hasn't tried Built Bars before, they're learning the best tasting protein bars that are out there on the market. Sayre and we attest to it so much. Very tasty. And like I said, it is like biting into a cloud there. They also contain 17 grams of protein, 100% real chocolate, and not to mention, each bar is around 130 calories, which is low on sugar. So you got to try Built Bar today. Go to Built.com and get 15% off your order right now by using the code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. Once again, promo code LOCKEDON15 gets you 15% off your next order at Built.com. All right, Sayre, continue on today's conversation here, Locked On Broncos, in terms of which players need to step up on offense, defense, and coaching in the second half if the Broncos are going to go on a run. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts in audio format, or whether you're watching us on YouTube. Do us a quick favor. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button and you comment for the algorithm. Share your thoughts on this episode. Share your comments on who needs to step up on offense, defense, and the coaching staff in the second half of the season, and get involved in the conversation with other members around Broncos country. All right, Sayre, let's continue on here today. Let's focus on the defensive side of the ball for this Broncos football team coming into the second half. And I think when we look at the defense, it's been elite. It's been as advertised. It's been as we've discussed throughout training camp here. There's been some things here and there that they need to improve on, and obviously the defense has been battered by injuries, but they're still playing at a very high level, which, Sayre, I'd say that's very, very promising. We talk about pass rush win rates, and, not only is that a combination of the talent that the Broncos have, but I think it's really a tip of the cap to Broncos defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero and the way that he's scheming pressure to get guys free. We never saw any of this with Vic Fangio. We just saw straight up four-man rush, no designs, no crazy twister stunts like that. And I would say that Ejiro Evero has maximized the talent of the Broncos defense, and there's some young guys that are filling in. So when we look at the defense, which has really been the strength of the team, who needs to step up in the second half of the season?
Well, I say, speaking to the point that you just made, Cody, about guys getting pressure, being put in position to succeed as pass rushers, I think the obvious direction to look in the second half of the season after the big Bradley Chubb trade is going to be at guys like Baron Browning, Randy Gregory. Those are going to be the guys now that everybody looks at with a different level of pressure. It's kind of just like when the Broncos signed Randy Gregory in the first place instead of somebody like Von Miller. It's not, Randy Gregory's fault that the Broncos didn't sign Von Miller, but everybody's going to compare him to Von Miller because they're two free agents signed from the same class when the Broncos were obviously willing to spend big money. Now you're looking at Randy Gregory and Baron Browning as the guys that are replacing Bradley Chubb, who just got a ton of money from the Miami Dolphins, by the way, over $60 million guaranteed, $119 million total over 6 years. Congrats to Bradley Chubb. But man, those two guys, to me, Cody, off the edge, are the guys that have to step up big in the second half of the season. Of course, it's going to be more of a group effort there as well, with guys like Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, the new guy, Jacob Martin as well. But I think Randy Gregory, Baron Browning, those are the two guys right now that have to step up in a big way to prove that the Broncos made the right decision by trading Bradley Chubb for a first-round pick when they had the opportunity to do so.
I agree with you 110% there. I mean, all eyes are going to be on Browning, all eyes are going to be on Gregory, and we don't know at this current point when this episode drops that is Baron going to be ready for Tennessee? Is Randy Gregory going to be ready? I mean, George Payton even said that, Baron could be ready, but like Randy, he's probably going to need some more time. So it's like, all right, well, if that's not the case, Jonathan Cooper, come on down. I think that the Broncos are going to rely a little bit more on this pass rush in waves approach, especially on the outside, as Nathaniel Hackett alluded to early on in the season, because simply Denver is going to need it. And I do think that we're going to see a combination to keep guys fresh, right? So while I think that Baron Browning, if he's healthy, he's probably going to be on the field the most for Denver, We're going to see a healthy rotation of Cooper, Bonito, and even newcomer Jacob Martin as well, alongside Jonathan Kongbo. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Broncos outside linebackers do here. I think a lot of people were wondering, right? Because remember the feeling before the Broncos played the Dallas Cowboys after they traded away Von Miller? Everyone's like, wow, all right, the season's over. White flag, throw the flag in, throw the towel in here for this Broncos team. And then that's where we really saw a guy like Jonathan Cooper really step up into the fray alongside Stephen Weatherly, a former veteran Bronco name that George Payton brought in. So I'm optimistic about the edge rusher position. I agree. I think these guys will have to step up and add a little bit more to their plate than they already have. I'm going to go to the secondary now. You know me, I'm a secondary guy, Sayre. And I think the primary thing is when you look at Patrick Surtain, no one wants to throw his way. I mean, he didn't receive a single target in 29 coverage snaps against the New York Jets. He didn't allow anything big against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They hardly looked his way. And I think we're going to go to Damari Mathis here. You know, I want to give a lot of praise here to Damari Mathis too, because he also didn't see too much action as well. I mean, a lot of the stuff that the Jaguars want to do was on the intermediate crossing patterns, inside routes, or even like dump-offs. Like Trevor Lawrence checked down to the running back quite a bit in that game there. So for me, it's like, all right, hey, Damari Mathis has stepped in so far this season in various points. When Surtain got hurt against the Houston Texans, he came in and stepped up, had a couple of pass breakups, including one on Brandon Cooks in the end zone. And then you look at Ronald Darby's injury. He stepped in and has played really well. Outside of the 4 pass interferences that everyone was so fixated on, Damari Mathis has actually played pretty good football, even with those pass interferences. He's in position, probably has to get his head turned around a little bit more. But like I said, he has exceeded the expectations that I had for him as a rookie, right? Because I think when we all envisioned Surtain and Ronald Darby, like, all right, hey, Damari can just sit back and he can develop and play some special teams. And no, he's been thrown into the fire and he's done a tremendous job, but he's going to have to keep doing that here in the second half because you're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs twice, and they've loaded up here. They've got Kadarius Toney, McCole Hardman. They've got a multitude of dudes. Obviously, MVS is one of those guys. Travis Kelce, still kind of the boogeyman here for this Broncos team. He's not going to have to worry too much about covering him, but as a young rookie cornerback, you're going to be playing some pretty good quarterbacks, and they're going to look to target the rookie here. So Damari Mathis and some of the other cornerbacks like Michael Ojemudia, so on and so forth, they're going to have to step up here in the second half.
They are, and I was going to bring up exactly what you just said, Cody, about the second half of the season. You're facing off against Patrick Mahomes twice. We got to get Derek Carr again. You know, you got to go up against Justin Herbert and the Chargers. You got Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. I mean, all these different teams and quarterbacks that you're playing against and facing off against in the second half. It's going to be a great test for Damari Mathis and just great growth for him, right? I mean, we saw him against the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert was just picking on him. I mean, you felt bad for the guy almost, but at the same time, you saw the confidence in him to just keep on coming back, and he ended up making some big plays even in that Chargers game that, like you said, they get overlooked because of those pass interference calls, some of them subjective and maybe not even pass interference at all. But I think, to me, Damari Mathis, Cody, he's that guy that in the second half of the season, as teams continue to avoid Pat Surtain, how are you going to step up? When the ball is thrown your way, are you going to get your head turned around? Are you going to make a play on the ball? Are you going to be able to maybe create some turnovers? If you do give up a reception like Michael Ojemudia his rookie year, are you going to be able to punch the ball out and find a way to create and make a play regardless? Now he's got, obviously, Justin Simmons healthy behind him, Kareem Jackson as well. Those two guys being healthy, I think, really helps a rookie cornerback because you know you have some help. You know you have people, and K'Wan Williams to the inside that teams don't. They're going to soon stop wanting to throw that direction as well because he keeps making plays. So Damari Mathis has a lot of pressure on him for a 4th-round pick, but at the same time, you kind of love to see it because really he could be somebody that factors in. We talked about the NFL draft earlier this week, Cody, for the 2023 draft. Now that the Broncos have a 1st-round pick, could Damari Mathis prevent the Broncos from really targeting corner in the 1st round? Could he be a building block for this team? He certainly has the size, the athleticism. Now he's going to be able to put it on tape to say, I should be the starter opposite Pat Surtain in 2023.
And I'll give a little bit of an honorable mention here as well. The run defense as a whole for the defense has to be a little bit more consistent, right? You have to plug your gaps in. And part of me is just trying to figure out, I'm going to go and ask Ejiro Evero next week as the Broncos prepare for Derrick Henry and the Titans. What has been the biggest issue for them in terms of giving up some big runs and allowing some big performances? They haven't really allowed anything that's been backbreaking, maybe minus the Josh Jacobs game there. But for the most part, you can't allow something like this to happen in the second half schedule here for the Broncos. So that is something to keep an eye on as an honorable mention as to who needs to step up after the bye week. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I, we are going to highlight the coaching staff. Which coaches need to step up and be better in the second half of the season or have some pressure on them due to some new faces in new places. We dive into that coming up here in a moment, but before we do that, let me tell you about LinkedIn, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team and faster. All you have to do is create an easy post on LinkedIn Jobs. It's easy, takes a couple of minutes there, and then you add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn job profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. Make sure you end the 2022 year on a strong note with the right team member for your job here today. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. And LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Continuing on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts or whether you're watching on YouTube. Broncos Country, we just want to say thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. For all the latest Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more, you get it here every single day, all year long. Win or lose, we got you covered. Locked On Broncos. All right, Sayre, let's get into the fourth quarter action on today's episode of the show. And we've been talking about which players in the offense and defensive side of the ball need to step up. Now we go to the coaching staff here. I think it's easy to see where we're going to go with the first guy we're going to mention here. And there's a multitude of coaches who will probably need to step up. There's a little bit more pressure added onto their plate. But let's start with Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett and also the play caller for the Broncos offense, which has been off to a really, really rough start this season. The offense has to take off in the second half. Now, while the win against the Jacksonville Jaguars was very big, Nathaniel Hackett will have to step up on the offensive side of the ball. The offense will have to be better because CEO Greg Penner said, hey, we are really evaluating, we're expecting a strong second half finish for this team. So with that, mention there from Penner, that's a lot of pressure here for Hackett.
It is a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure because you have a big money quarterback. You obviously have a lot of injuries that you've been dealing with this season on both sides of the ball. But as Nathaniel Hackett came in, he wanted that pressure of being the offensive play caller. He's obviously given the role to, an assistant now in terms of game management, which I think Cody has been much better. Even against the Jacksonville Jaguars, we saw some really good clock management in terms of trying to get an extra possession there at the end of the first half. And we also saw the Broncos do some really good play sequencing at the end of the game with just over 4 minutes left. They got it down under 2 minutes before the Jaguars got the ball back. So really good job in those situations. And those are just a couple of examples of the improvements. But I think we did see improvement in game management. What we need to see improvement on now is we need to see consistency from the offense, and the play calling can't be so predictable, right? We can't be seeing players not getting utilized the way that they're supposed to be. I mean, and maybe that speaks to what we talked about yesterday with George Paton and Alberto Cuebanam, where it's really finding a way to make your most talented players involved. I mean, I think that sounds kind of ridiculous to say, but it's kind of where we're at. KJ Hamler, we've seen in recent weeks, he needs to be getting the ball a bit more. Jerry Jeudy, same with him. I mean, even finding a way to get Courtland Sutton going, because look at what we've seen with Greg Dulcich, I think has been a testament to what Nathaniel Hackett can do in terms of scheming for your most talented players. He's been willing, more than willing, it seems, to find packages of plays to get Greg Dulcich involved in the offense. And what has happened? Well, he's basically setting Broncos rookie tight end records out there. So I think Nathaniel Hackett has it in him to do all these different things. It's just figuring it out consistently. And I think that speaks to another coach on the offensive side of the ball, Cody. Consistency, even with some of these injuries that we've been seeing, we need to see guys come in and play well, because the Broncos, we talked about it before the season, that the fact that the Broncos had maybe 10, 11 guys that should be on NFL rosters and playing, at some point or another. Now we're seeing the war on attrition take its toll. How is offensive line coach Butch Barry going to adjust in the second half after kind of a, not so great first half?
Well, and I'd say that's a huge question, right? Because when you think about the injuries right now, Quinn Miners luckily is healthy. You lose Lloyd Cushenberry for who knows how long. He's going to miss some time with the groin injury. Billy Turner's now starting to get more acclimated and I think has been pretty solid. And then at left guard, really, just the question is, can Dalton Reisner be a little bit more consistent as well? Or has Reisner's struggles been attributed to Lloyd Cushenberry's struggles right there? I mean, when you have the middle struggling right there, it can affect the left and the right guard. So I think that's something to keep an eye on as well. Do we see an elevated level of play from Reisner here in the second half with a different center at that position? I think that's something to monitor. And then no one's talking about it enough, Sayre, but Calvin Anderson had a really good game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for me, that's where my frustration with Butch Barry has been, because Calvin has been very consistent all throughout training camp and things like that. Now, granted, he went against Micah Parsons at right tackle in joint training camp practice, and he had a little bit of a rough day. But from that moment forward, it's like, okay, the Broncos coaching staff and Butch Barry, I think it's primarily Barry, that was like, oh, well, he's struggling against Micah Parsons. We can't trust him on the field. But yet they throw Cam Fleming out there, who just simply has not been good and was not a great option there, is not like a legitimate starter, is more so a backup player that can fill in there for you, better in run protection versus pass protection there. But, it's just like, be more consistent and have faith in your players. As a coach, you have to give them room to make mistakes. And it seems like the leash for some other guys on the offensive line has been a lot longer than I think the leash that we've seen Calvin Anderson have so far. So, like I said, I think Calvin had a really good game against the Jaguars, and I hope it's a proving point to Butch Barry. Like, hey, have trust in your players. If you don't trust your players, then why are you even coaching at this point? To me, Butch Barry has a lot of pressure on him. But kind of what goes hand in hand, right, with offensive play calling, offensive line play, we also talk about running backs. And Tyrone Wheatley, not necessarily like the position is underperformed, but there's a lot of new faces that he has to bring up to speed, which could be a little bit of a challenge.
It could be, and I think that's going to be something that he has to really have his guys ready every single week, and not just two guys. Well, we planned on going into the season with Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, with a little Mike Boone kind of sprinkled in there on the top. But I think now you've got four guys at the very least that you have to consider. How are you going to split up snaps? How are you going to have these guys ready on any given week to be the starter? Because people have been kind of talking about Latavius Murray like he's the new starting running back for the Broncos, with Melvin Gordon as kind of the secondary guy. And I think that now Chase Edmonds coming into the fold, he's going to play all three downs. Marlon Mack, what does the team envision for him? Because they kept him and they cut Divine Ozigbo after promoting Ozigbo to the roster. So it's going to be fun to see, Cody. I know that your pets are excited about it. I know they get just giddy talking about the Broncos running back position, but I'm excited to kind of see how Tyrone Wheatley handles this unit as well going forward in the second half.
Like I said, they got the dog barking half the time, got the cat trying to jump on. It's chaos over here, my friend. We'll see.
Excited. We'll
see if the second half of this Broncos team can take off. And that's something that Sayre and I, we're going to look at in the next episode, Locked On Broncos, for you on Monday. You get the early preview of it on Sunday on YouTube. Obviously, youtube.com/Locked On Broncos. You want early access to every podcast. We drop the video a day before for everybody. If this is your first time listening, welcome in. Hope you enjoyed the show. And if you love the show, make sure you hit that subscribe to that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. But on the next episode of the show, Sayre and I, we're going to dive deep into what if the Broncos go on a big-time second-half run. What do they need to do? What will it look like? And could it reset expectations? We dive into that on the next episode, Locked On Broncos.